Just want to give a quick word about this Superman 3 video series now. Originally, it was 1 hour-long video, but it kept getting dinged for copyright, even though it's clearly in fair use. So I gave up trying to upload the full thing. I'm going to try uploading it in episodes instead and see where that gets me. Pretty fucking annoyed about it, but here we are. If you do want to watch the original hour-long cut of this the way I originally intended it to be seen, that's available on my Patreon. The link will be down below in the description thingy. So I'd appreciate it if you watch it there as well. But yes, here's the episodic version instead, because this is where we are, I guess. Okay, enjoy the video. Goodbye.
Two movies in, and the Superman film franchise is still going strong. The first film was of course an absolute smash hit, and the second was also well received all around. All eyes were turning to the future, in hopes for a third movie that would take what made the first two films work and improve on them further, bringing a brand new adventure to be remembered and adored by fans all around the world. Yeah, Superman 3 is not a good movie. This is a pretty uncontroversial opinion, I feel, because it is pretty bad. It's not funny despite the fact that it's really trying to be. It's messy and occasionally exceedingly bizarre, but it also fascinates me. This is in part because I actually borderline unironically like this movie. Sure, it's a disaster, but I'm incapable of not having a good time when I'm watching it. It's really a lot of fun in its own chaotic way. The other thing that fascinates me is how it's such a disaster, because half of this movie is terrible, awful shit that everyone involved should be embarrassed to have been involved in, but the other half of it is actually extremely clever and displays some really creative thinking in terms of the application of Superman's lore, his powers, and what he means as a hero. It's really weird. This movie is such a spectacular work of chaos that my analysis of this movie has been one of the hardest things I've ever had to write for this channel. There was a temptation to just do what I always do, you know, recap the plot in my snarky Australian accent with stupid jokes chucked in. I mean, it served me well for the past 3 Superman related videos apparently, but I don't think that format is really going to do the disaster that is this film any justice at all. So I've been chasing my tail trying to articulate my feelings on this largely pretty inconsequential Superman film, and this is what I've come up with. So settle in, chuckle fucks, and welcome to my Superman 3 extravaganza. But first, a cheeky Patreon plug. I know you're probably on this hell site trying to watch a video without being asked to subscribe to something, but hear me out. The Michael and Lo-Fi Patreon not only will get you early access to my videos, but you will also get an inside look as to my process of making these videos. This includes clips from work in progress videos, stuff that doesn't make the cut of existing videos, audio bloopers, and even the notes I take when watching content for this channel. On top of all that, you'll be able to lodge video requests, so if there's something you'd like me to cover, you can tell me and I will put it on the list. There might also be polls for what you want me to do next. That seems like fun. To tell the truth, working out what exactly to put up there isn't easy, on account of my not really having much of a personality. So not only will you be getting all this, but you'll also be supporting this channel, for which I would be very grateful. So swing by my Patreon. It's a little sparse at the moment, but once I get into the swing of things over there, it will be much more interesting, hopefully. Okay, ad read over, back to the video. As always, we'll begin with a little historical setup, partly because I've done it in every other video I've done on Superman, partly because this movie's history is super relevant to why it is the way it is, and partly because bits of it are really funny. Now, those of you familiar with the history of the Superman movies would think that, after the mess that was the production of the first two, that things wouldn't be able to get a whole lot worse, wouldn't you? Well, you'd be wrong, because oh boy. After it was announced that Richard Donner would have nothing to do with Superman going forward after the nonsense that happened on the set of the first two movies, the short version being that everybody involved except for Christopher Reeve was a massive cock, producers Alexander and Ilya Salkind were pretty much free to do whatever they wanted with the movies. Soon before the release of Superman 2, they announced that a third movie would be going ahead, with Richard Lester once again directing the film. Ilya Salkind wrote up a treatment for his idea for the movie, which would have included Supergirl, Brainiac, and Dudley Moore as Mr. Mxyzptlk. The idea to use Brainiac was one that had carried over from Donner's original intentions for the series had he stayed on, but everything else was original to the Salkinds. This treatment equipment for the movie was put aside for several reasons, with Warner Brothers telling the Salkinds that it would be intensely expensive to shoot. But threads of the script would find themselves in the final script for Superman 3, including the idea of an evil computer and a dark Superman. I'll actually come back to this treatment, by the way, because it is a fascinating disaster in of itself. The next wrinkle in the movie's development came in the casting process. After the nonsense on set of Superman 2, Gene Hackman outright refused to work for the Salkinds again, condemning their actions towards Donna in the production of the previous films. This forced the Salkinds to come up with new characters in Lex Luthor's place, leading to the invention of Ross Webster. Furthermore, Margot Kidder publicly condemned these actions too, and mysteriously for Superman 3, her role was dramatically cut in favor of Lana Lang.
Coincidence? I think not!
Now, the Salkinds like to say that her diminished role has nothing to do with her telling them they suck, swearing that Lana was the plan from the beginning, but come on, I think we all know that's bullshit. Then of course came the most infamous piece of casting in this movie, Richard Pryor. Apparently, this decision can be traced back to an interview Pryor did on Johnny Carson, where he said he'd gone to see Superman 2 and had really enjoyed it. The Salkinds apparently saw this interview, thought, wouldn't it be fun to get him into the series because he likes it, and gave him a call. It also seemed to be based on the fact that he was a hot ticket at the time, so essentially Pryor in this movie is a piece of stunt casting, which in of itself wouldn't have been a terrible thing had they actually given him something to work with, which of course they didn't, but we'll come back to that. Now that we have a basic idea of the environment that created this movie, let's have a look at what we will generously refer to as the plot. Remember when I said I wouldn't be recapping the plot in my snarky, annoying voice? Well, I lied. Well, kinda. I will be recapping the plot and I will be annoying, but this time I'm doing this at the front of the video and doing it very quickly. That way, everyone has a baseline for the more long-form commentary I will be doing throughout the remainder of the video. Cool? Cool. Down on his luck, average Joe Gus Gorman finds himself applying to work at Webster, where he finds to his surprise that he's actually a computer genius who can hack his way into anything. He quickly uses these abilities to rip off his place of work to the tune of $85,000, raising the attention of his boss, Ross Webster. However, instead of turning him over to the police, Webster decides to hire Gus to help satiate his lust for world domination. Oh, fuck me, satiate his lust, that was awful. At the same time, Clark Kent is back in Smallville, reigniting his friendship with former classmate Lana Lang. She now has a son named Who Cares, and is being pursued by her drunk-ass ex-boyfriend from high school, Brad. This plotline barely goes anywhere, by the way. These two stories converge when Gus hurricanes a coffee farm in Colombia using a weather satellite, but is ultimately foiled when Superman flies in and just kind of stops it. Webster decides that Superman must die for his plans for global domination, so he has Gus use his computer hacking skills to help synthesize a piece of kryptonite, which Gus literally hands to Superman on a silver platter. However, because Gus replaced a portion of the chemical makeup of kryptonite with cigarette tar, this kryptonite doesn't so much kill Superman, but more just turns him into a grade A twat. This ends up kinda working in Webster's favor anyway, and he just takes over the world, kind of. About the same time, he has a computer built for Gus that Gus says can literally do anything, as if he's not been omnipotent with a keyboard already this entire movie. But spoiler alert, the computer's evil! Superman has an existential crisis and recovers from his kryptonite-infused wankery just in time to stop the machine using a plain vial of acid. And then Webster goes to jail, and Gus gets off pretty much scot-free. Clark helps Lana move to Metropolis to start a new life, and then the movie ends. Now, if you're someone watching this who's never seen Superman 3, you're probably thinking, wow, that is an insane movie synopsis. Surely it can't get weirder than that. I'm sorry, imaginary person I just made up in my head. You are wrong. It gets so much weirder and worse. It gets so much worse. I don't think this is really a point I have to make. This is not a good movie. It just isn't. But it's far more interesting than that to me. The movie isn't just not good, it's weird. This is the most insane screenplay ever written. If you told me that Bob and Leslie Newman wrote this while living on breakfasts of Red Bull and cocaine, I think I'd believe you. Almost nothing in this screenplay works, and the bits that do work so well as to be distracting, pulling you out of the movie even more. It is a trip. So what is it about this screenplay that makes it such an event to see unfold? Several things, really. The first major indicator of this being a shitty script is that it strikes me as being exceptionally lazy. Watching it, you could almost get the impression that the screenwriters shat this one out over a weekend and turned it in as it was. And sure, some of my favorite things ever written have been written in the same way. Douglas Adams and Graham Williams wrote City of Death for Doctor Who in a booze-induced delirium over a single weekend, according to BBC Legend. But I'm not talking about, oh shit, we have a deadline, whoops, last minute panic opened our third eye written in a weekend. I'm talking talking, we want this movie out in theaters as fast as possible. Let's just rush the writing process and hope it turns out well, written in a weekend. This entire aside serves little to no purpose. I'm keeping it anyway. My point is, the laziness of the script is readily obvious to anybody who's watching. Let's take the character of Brad, the layabout ex-boyfriend who's drunk, and that's all the character he's getting. Now, the theory is that in this movie, Lana's story is all about moving on from Smallville, finding for herself a life that she's always wanted, as opposed to settling for less. There's a sketch of an idea of Brad being the life she could just choose to accept rather than find something better. He could have been written as being cool and collected on the surface, but a terrible person underneath. The darkness behind the illusion of safety and staying where you are. It doesn't even have to be an obvious metaphor or anything, but this would at least give Brad a bit of depth as a character. But this script doesn't bother to pursue that in any fashion. Instead, he's just drunk and an arsehole. That's it. Fuck you for hoping he'd actually be a round character. Another readily apparent example of laziness is in the use of Gus's computer hacking skills. Now, to be completely fair to this movie, it's not alone in this. The 80s was a time full of movies that didn't have a clue how to write computer coding, so they just made shit up and put it down to luck as to whether it worked. So while it might be tempting to rail on this movie for scenes where Gus overrides the Webster security by just typing override security, I won't do that now, because the far more glaring problem is that his ability to hack into things is treated as a magic wand by which they can just make shit happen. Need Gus to destroy coffee crops in Colombia? It's okay. He can just hack a weather surveillance system to fucking make weather happen.
You're taking a piss!
And then later he uses that same satellite, again, a weather surveillance satellite, to analyze the component materials of kryptonite by having it scan the point in the sky where Krypton used to be. Because apparently this weather satellite has imaging capabilities that would make the James Webb Telescope jealous. You can't just have massive technological rewrites explained away by he hacked it. Computer code is not the electronic version of a wizard did it. Put some effort into your script, for God's sake. Oh yeah, and it also succeeds in completely undermining one of the main points of Gus's plotline, but we'll come back to that. This laziness is also apparent with the way it treats the Daily Planet scenes. In the first two movies, these scenes were an important part of the DNA of the films. They provided a moment for the characters who worked there to interact, to bounce off each other in entertaining ways. They contained some of the wittiest dialogue of the first film, and while Superman 2 showed a bit of a step down in this respect, the Daily Planet scenes in that movie are still a joy to watch. But in this movie, they're not, because no effort is put into them. Instead of allowing the characters to occupy the space and bounce off each other, they just stand around and spit terrible one-liners at each other, or get themselves involved in a really stupid joke about bingo of all things. It's pretty painful to see these characters just become vehicles for crappy jokes, especially when Jimmy Olsen at least is given an opportunity to grow as a character when he's given more than 2 minutes of screen time. But no, his extra screen time mostly consists of crappy jokes too, which honestly gives me a pretty good segue into my next point here, the humor. I don't even really think I need to say much about this bit, which is why I'm bringing it up early so we can get it out of the way. The humor sucks. It's terrible. Now, everyone is pretty quick to blame Lester and Lester alone for this. And to be fair, that's tempting. If you watched Help and then this movie back to back, it would make sense to blame him entirely for it because in some ways they actually share some qualities in terms of level of insanity. But the thing is, we can't really do that because Lester had little or nothing to do with actually writing the screenplay for this movie. That dubious honor falls on the shoulders of writers Bob and Leslie Newman. They had also written the original screenplays for Superman 1 and 2, but according to Donner, their versions of these scripts had been excessively stupid, leading to him bringing Tom Mankiewicz in to entirely rewrite the two movies into the shape that we see them take in the final films. However, when Donner departed, Mankiewicz followed him, so he wasn't around to rewrite the Newman script for Superman 3. The result is this movie contains the tone that the Newmans wanted to establish for Superman in the first place, and oh boy do I miss Mankiewicz. In a word, this movie's sense of humor is lame. And to the movie's credit, it does let you know pretty early on that this is going to be the theme of this movie. The title sequence of this movie is one of the most lambasted parts of it, so I won't bang on about it too much, but it still bears mentioning because, holy shit. Remember the majestic intros of Superman's 1 and 2? The sweeping theme, the starscapes? Well, forget all that. Instead, in this movie, the credits play over the lamest slapstick comedy you've ever seen. People splat pies on each other's faces, walk through paintings, do pratfalls on gumballs, and knock over telephone boxes. In, I must remind you, a Superman movie. All because they're distracted by a woman. She's important to the plot, by the way, and her name is Lorelei Ambrosia. Lorelei Ambrosia. What is this, a Roger Moore James Bond film?
James, to my friends. Holly Goodhead.
I feel like if people just gave up on this movie as the credits rolled, I don't think I'd have blamed them because it really is that terrible. Most of the rest of the humor in this movie follows pretty close to this fashion. There is either an overabundance of dreadful visual jokes, like Gus Gorman skiing off the side of a building and being perfectly fine, or these cutaways during the scene where Gus wreaks havoc on Earth through the sheer power of his hacking or something. It's just not funny at all. And the aggravating thing is, you can see in the screenplay there was a chance for it not to be like this. Throughout the film, the humor surrounding Lana and Clark is actually very tastefully done, such as the joke around Lana accidentally mixing up a set of balls and records. There is a genuinely pretty funny joke where Webster says he believes the person who ripped the company off would keep a low profile if he wasn't completely stupid, seconds after which Gus pulls up to work in a convertible he bought with the money he stole from Webster. If they had kept the same amount of restraint or cleverness as they showed in these scenes, the humor wouldn't be as offensive. But they don't. They let it infect pretty much every other part of this movie, leading to an abundance of overly terrible one-liners and visual gags. Actually, if there's anything that Richard Pryor's presence proves, it's to drive home the point that this movie's humor could have been done a lot better. I haven't watched a lot of Pryor's comedy routines, but I've seen enough to know that he's a genuinely really funny man. He has a natural observational wit that never fails to make me laugh. And he's no slouch when it comes to writing screenplays either, if the critical reception for Blazing Saddles is to be believed. But instead, he's stuck playing out either extremely watered down versions of his comedy routine, or stupid pantomime jokes that make the Lex Luthor comedy bits I whined about in the first movie look positively serious. I think if they'd let him have a crack at the screenplay to tidy it up a bit, we might have had a far better film. But no, instead we have Bob and Leslie Newman's vision of top-class comedy, and it sucks ass. And the thing is, when this movie isn't being lazy or blatantly unfunny, it's just being really stupid. A lot of the time, something will happen in the movie where your reaction isn't just not funny, didn't laugh, but an active eye roll that will have you seeing into the nether. There are small things, like Metropolis being referred to as the Big Apricot in one scene, because you see, it's like New York, and New York is the Big Apple, so obviously we have to do the same thing, but a little different. And then there are other far more obvious things, gags that I remember watching as a kid and even then being almost offended by. Superman turning a tornado inside out for one, or the men in the walk sign beating each other up because computer hacking, or again, Gus skiing off a roof and not dying instantly. All of this adds up pretty significantly, and as a result, it becomes pretty obvious that nobody involved was taking this movie seriously at all, save for Christopher Reeve, but we'll come back to him. And the overall question I have was, what is this in aid of? Why make this movie this mind-bogglingly stupid? Who is this for? It's not for the adults, because most of them are growing tired of the stupid gags every 2 minutes. So you're left thinking to yourself, well, it must be for the kids, right? But the thing is, even the kids can pick up on the fact that this movie is unforgivably stupid. On the Doctor Who DVD commentaries, yes, this is about to become relevant, Katie Manning, the actress who played Jo Grant, often spoke of what made the approach taken to Doctor Who during her time on the show work perfectly. To paraphrase, she said that everyone involved truly believed in what they were doing. Essentially, if you're winking at the screen about how, look, it's just a paper mache creature, isn't this fun? The kids that Doctor Who was aimed at would pick up on it and not take it seriously either, killing their investment in what's happening. But if for that moment you truly believe that the paper mache blob in front of you is an alien that's about to eat you, or that the dustbin in front of you is a homicidal intergalactic fascist that will wipe out everything you love, that commitment to the bit carries over, and as a result the kids become scared of that paper mache blob and stay invested in what happens next. This is why a serial like The Green Death continues to work perfectly to this day, whereas something like Paradise Towers can only be enjoyed if you turn your brain off. The same principle applies to the Superman films as well. Lex Luthor and General Zod worked then, and still work today, because everyone involved fully commits to it. But in Superman 3, they stopped committing to the bit, instead choosing to wink at the kids and go, haha, isn't this silly and fun? The ironic result being that they lost their target audience by treating them like they were stupid, while completely alienating the adult audience in the process. The stupidity of this movie kills the stakes dead. Nothing matters, and even a kid can tell. I should know, because when I first watched this movie as a kid, I realized by about 2 minutes in that nobody involved was taking this seriously, so I didn't either. The thing is, if this movie was just unfunny and stupid, I don't think it would have had quite the reputation it does in the fandom. There's one more factor that has to be taken into account when talking about this movie.
It's insane.
If you told me that this screenplay was written on a diet of black coffee and cocaine, I think I'd believe you, because this movie is out of its goddamned mind. Wait, have I already used this simile? The lunacy of this movie is immediately pretty obvious on a structural level. There are at least 4 different plot threads running alongside each other all at once, and the movie haphazardly jumps in between them in a desperate attempt to tie itself down to a singular plot. A pair of plot lines could smash into each other in one scene, and then then run for 20 minutes not referencing each other at all before being awkwardly shoved into each other again. And that's assuming that they bother to try and work them together. The result is really dizzying, and it also means you've gotten the basic gist of 4 different stories without ever really feeling like you completely grasp any individual one of them. The other side effect of this is you're getting whiplash every time the scene changes because the movie wouldn't know tonal consistency if it tripped on it. See, one part of this movie wants to be a silly, goofy movie starring Richard Pryor. The other part of it wants to be a dark exploration of Superman's evil side. The two ideas clash so violently that about halfway through you genuinely feel like you're watching a completely different movie to the one you started. But even beyond the structure, this movie is filled to the brim with moments that are just a sight to behold. And a lot of it is what I will call, oh my god, this movie sure was made in the 80s shit. Like, this is a movie marketed at kids. But we have lines like this.
I don't want to go to jail because they have robbers and rapists who rape robbers. Mr. Gorman,
and this.
Oh, I know a few things.
So I understand from the graffiti I've seen.
And at some point in the scrapyard fight, a few Playboy pics are very clearly visible in a crane's cockpit. Kids movie, Richard. And then of course you throw in the Newman's terrible sense of humor, Lester's proclivity for extended set pieces that consist of the strangest thing you've ever seen, and then you get scenes that come out of nowhere, serve absolutely no purpose, and are utterly inexplicable. I already mentioned the bit where Gus's hacking causes chaos around the world. I accuse this bit of being needlessly stupid because it is, but it's also a fever dream. It starts from simple stuff like misprinted checks and a stupid orange in the face joke, but then before you know what's happening, it's made the leap to the traffic lights punching each other's lights out, all while a jaunty little waltz plays cheerfully to itself in the background. I am genuinely trying to explain what this scene makes me feel, but it's like some kind of Lovecraftian monster. I don't understand it, and I feel like I'm going insane trying to explain it. But what really puts the bow of craziness on this movie, what really underlines how batshit it is that it is in the same movie series as the first 2 Superman movies. We've gone from a grand-scale epic origin story that brought the legend of Superman to the big screen with style, to a film that intertwines a tragic love story with the epic battle for the fate of planet Earth, to this. A movie where you can make a hurricane happen from an office computer in Smallville, and where Superman commits an act of illegal oil dumping because a hot blonde said she'll have sex with him if he does. Oh yeah, that happens too. What the fuck is this movie? Now, up until this point, I've been largely picking on this movie in terms of vibes. It feels lazy, it's not funny, it's just insane. However, beyond that, this movie also just doesn't know how to tell a story. Take the plot involving the evil computer that definitely isn't at all Brainiac. This entire section is supposed to be the main driving force of the movie, but the thing is, it's completely arse backwards. Allow me to explain. See, this plot thread starts promisingly enough. Down on his luck, Gus Gorman manages to score a quiet data entry job for Webster, where he shows a surprising aptitude for computer programming. It's worth mentioning here again that the screenplay's grasp of computer code is terrible to the point of being insulting, but that's really neither here nor there in terms of the plot. The build-up of him using these skills to steal from Webster is also promising, even if I suspect the idea of stealing half cents that don't actually get added to paychecks from the computer banks is utter nonsense. Look, I'm not a computer code expert, but I think any automated system like this would only ever round to the nearest cent, and those half cents would straight up just never exist in the code. But the moment he starts working for Webster personally, it all falls apart. As we've already established, Gus's first criminal caper, the bollocks about using a weather satellite to make hurricanes, is excessively stupid, but it also succeeds in diminishing the threat of Gus's supercomputer once it becomes a factor in the movie. When Gus introduces his sketches for the computer, he says it can do anything at all. But it's clear that Gus is already capable of doing whatever the hell he wants without the aid of a massive supercomputer, so you're left wondering what exactly the point of it is, besides introducing a new antagonist into the movie well over an hour into the proceedings. It's really messy. The logical way to play it out would have been to have Gus run an initial small but effective caper from the Smallville computer, then say he needs a more powerful computer if he wants to really do whatever he wants. Then the movie can show the supercomputer being progressively built around Gus as he uses it to make it rain at banks or cause traffic havoc, or if you still feel the need to, change the weather. Hell, what would have been actually really cool is if the supercomputer's first task had been analyzing the kryptonite and being confused by the unknown part, leading to the tar kryptonite being synthesized. That way, when it successfully replicates real kryptonite at the end, it would work as a holy shit, the computer's become so much smarter, what else is it capable of moment. But it doesn't play out like that, and it leaves the supercomputer in this bizarre state of redundancy. It means that any menace the computer is going to have relies entirely on the twist that it's alive, and I feel that robs it of any impact. Rather than being a threat that is built up to across the film, it's just a sudden, ooh, plot twist, the computer's evil, I guess. What could have been a pretty frightening villain is rendered just kind of silly, and it's all down to really poor story planning. That and the robot robot Vera moment. This bit where Vera is possessed by the computer serves absolutely no purpose at all. I can't even say for sure what the movie was going for, which is annoying because I can think of a way that this could have been implemented really well. But this idea will be more relevant later, so we'll save it for then. In the meantime, we need to talk about the other majorly mishandled part of the plot involving the supercomputer, its creator. Here's the thing, I don't hate the idea of Gus Gorman. Actually, on paper, I really love the concept of his character. The idea of a genius who gets involved with an evil businessman because he's struggling to put food on the table is a really compelling one, and actually speaks to something that works really well within the ideology of Superman. And even in the finished movie, there are kernels of what could have made that work. Superman seeing someone who clearly got himself way in over his head and showing him some compassion and giving him a chance to do right by himself. This is perfectly in line with who Superman is as a character. But of course, Gus can't just be how Superman reacts to him, he has to be a well-rounded character on his own. And is he? No. Which is weird. Gus spends a lot of the movie front and center. He's a main character. By all logic, he should have some character to latch onto, but he doesn't. All we know about him by the end is that he's a genius, he's funny, and at the end of the day, he means well. These are all ingredients for a fully realized character, but it doesn't complete the picture. Instead, any time that could go to developing Gus as a character is spent on stupid jokes. The ultimate result of this is that you don't really care about. He's a cartoon character. He's not there to grow, he's there for you to laugh as he says funny things or stupid things happen to him. Actually, the way that Gus is written really speaks to the fundamental problem with this movie even more than this, and it revolves around the fact that he's played by and clearly written for Richard Pryor. As I noted earlier, I've not watched a lot of Pryor's stand-up work, but I have a basic understanding of his style, that he uses his comedy to comment on the social, racial, and economic disparities that were prevalent in society and still very much are today. And on the surface, this movie might fool itself into thinking it's adapting Pryor's work over to Superman. But it isn't. It's far too surface level. Sure, it comments on, wow, life's expensive, innit? But it's not actually saying anything. It's a cheap imitation of Pryor's comic style, just being read by Pryor himself, so the studio could cash in on having him in the movie. And this is why I think the biggest blow of potential to this movie was not having Pryor take a crack at the script while he was there. Superman as a franchise has always been about standing up for the downtrodden and the oppressed, and Pryor's perspective could have really brought Gus to life in that respect. There might have actually been some substance to the struggles Gus faces in day-to-day life, be that because he's working class or because he's a black man in Reagan's America. It might have meant that Gus felt less like a cartoon character who recites jokes and more like a real person with real fears and real struggles. And who knows, because of Pryor's particular wit in discussing these things, the movie might have actually been funny. But instead, we have the Newman script. So all of Pryor's effort into making Gus into a character has to go into his performance, which is, See, I don't think Pryor's acting is all bad in this movie. I think in the quieter moments, he's actually pretty good, but for most of the movie, he's playing himself up to a cartoonish level, especially in the bits where he's doing dress-up bits to further his missions for Webster. The result is that for every scene where you get a genuine performance from him, like when he actually does struggle with the morality of what he's done as he watches his own computer kill Superman, you get 3 like him dressed up like a general shouting God knows what. And to be completely fair to Pryor, I don't think all of this is his fault. It's far more clearly a directing issue that Lester wanted a more cartoonish performance rather than a genuine one. What's my ultimate takeaway here? That if everyone involved had stopped insisting on themselves and let Richard Pryor actually do what he does best, then Gus might have had a chance at being a legitimately great character, and as a result, the movie might have been a hell of a lot better. What might have also made this movie better is having some better main villains, but as established earlier, Gene Hackman flat out refused to come back for Superman 3, which meant that if the Salkinds wanted to keep an evil businessman lurking in the shadows of the movie, they had to come up with the idea of a new one. Enter Ross Webster, CEO of Webster, and his offsiders, his sister Vera and his trophy girlfriend, I guess, Lorelei Ambrosia. They are the weirdest characters to appear in a Superman movie this far. Now, there's the obvious main problem with them, which is that they do not feel in any way, shape, or form like a threat. Now, this is partially down to the pantomime acting involved in their portrayal. Robert Vaughn clearly doesn't give a shit about this movie, so he's not putting a lot of effort into making Webster a compelling villain. Annie Ross is there as Vera, and Pamela Stevenson is playing a blatant caricature, which is mostly pretty awful except for the moments where it suddenly isn't. Yeah, we'll come back to that. The other thing that declaws them as a threat is the writing. Throughout the movie, Webster and Vera talk a lot about how their company almost runs the world and all that stuff, and we see evidence that Webster has infiltrated most of every industry in the USA. This should be a little terrifying and might have lent itself to some good commentary, but this thread really doesn't go anywhere beyond Webster's mustache-twirling plans for world domination. Superman. The fact is that the movie doesn't actually show us that Webster is a threat. It just says he is. Literally anything nefarious done for him is done by Gus, so the movie basically tells us he doesn't really have the means to carry out his world domination plans. It makes him look like a dope. It's especially noticeable when he's compared to Luthor, who was established exceptionally well in the first movie as actually being the genius the movie kept claiming him to be. In that movie, they set it up by saying he's a genius, but then show us that he's clever through his casual concept of wiping out Metropolis or the scheme to incapacitate Superman. The fact that they don't feel capable of much isn't helped any by the fact that all three of them are comical buffoons who argue amongst each other and are shown just plain fucking up a lot more frequently than they are actually achieving anything. Now yes, in the first movie, a lot of Luthor's interactions with Otis or Tessmacher are played for a chuckle. I had a bit of a whinge about that in my video about said movie. But at the end of the day, the movie bothered to display their ability to actually do some damage and put the jokes aside when it needed to. This movie shows no such restraint. They're just dumbasses the whole time. Even a scene where they're trying to kill Superman is played off as a joke with this video game gimmick, which is admittedly a pretty cute little visual gag, but it doesn't do anything for the villain's sense of power is my point. What's also pretty damn obvious in the writing is that these characters are extremely shoddy reskins of the Lex Luthor crew. Webster is Lex, the great businessman with delusions of godhood. Vera is Tessmacher, his offsider who offers constant criticism, and Lorelei is the dumb one. It's so damn obvious. I'm reasonably sure a draft of the script was half written with the Luthor crew characters in place here, but then Hackman refused to return, so they just stuck new names on the project and changed as little dialogue as possible. Now, to give the Newmans something approaching credit, it's not a one-to-one translation. I mean, now Vera is the kind of henchman, and Lorelei is the girlfriend. See, the dumb one and the critical one switched roles in the business. That's new, I guess. But overall, the translation is overtly transparent, and as a result, the characters are just blatantly uninteresting. Even the one mildly intriguing thread revolving around these three, that being the suggestion that Lorelei is not actually as stupid as she pretends to be, doesn't really go anywhere. They don't even hint at a reason why she does that. It's just done for a couple of jokes, which is super annoying because if they'd expanded on that, we might have had a character we could empathize with. But no, not in this movie. Oh yeah, by the way, Vera and Lorelei seem to be in a pissing match about them being possessive over Webster, which gives Webster and Vera's relationship a subtext beyond them being siblings that I'd rather not think about because So yeah, as you might imagine, the large majority of this movie isn't much good at all. And again, it is worth noting that I have a grand old time with this movie, but it's not the same way I like the first two. With this one, there's a bit more ironic enjoyment involved because this movie genuinely sucks. Until it suddenly doesn't.